Friends, we're going through a very turbulent time in American politics, and I want to give my diagnosis for what the fundamental cause of the problems is. I believe that one of our basic political concepts is completely wrong, and that's what I'm calling the broken pillar. I want to present an analogy between the American political structure and a house that's built on several pillars. These pillars represent political concepts that support the pragmatic, practical business of governing society. My claim is that while several of these pillars are robust and strong and resilient, unfortunately, one of them is weak and rotting and broken. Because the structure depends on all of the pillars, the fact that one of them is breaking down is causing serious problems. The strong pillars are the ideals you learn in high school government class: civic rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, incredibly powerful basis for our society. Economic freedom allows us to grow wealth and organize the economy efficiently. Democracy is a great tool for creating consensus about technical issues. And science and technology are an incredibly powerful force for increasing the capabilities of our society. Here's the broken pillar. This is the Latin motto, E Pluribus Unum, from many one. This means that eventually all Americans are going to come together and form a shared set of values and culture and agreement about fundamental issues. I believe this concept is wrong as a matter of practical fact. And it's also wrong as an ideal. You don't actually want the government and the media and the elites to impose a consensus from above. Here's how the logic of E Pluribus Unum influences the government structure. Because of this concept, we believe that everyone's going to converge to the same set of fundamental values, regardless of race, religion, class. Maybe we have some technical disagreements about things like healthcare or taxation, but the big picture, the core values are shared throughout the entire country. And because of that, it makes sense and is justified to build a very powerful federal government that's going to enforce these values. It's not going to feel oppressive to anyone because we all have the same values. The federal government enforces those values, and that's what we want. That's what we want to see in our society. I want to challenge that belief by showing you two groups of people with totally different values. On the left, you have a group of people, millions and millions of members, who believe that abortion is basically a human right and guns are basically murder. That's obviously a simplification, but this is the general tendency of this group of people. On the right, you have another group that has the exact opposite set of viewpoints. They believe that abortion is basically murder, guns are basically a human right. Again, millions and millions of people who have this belief system, which is the exact opposite of the people on the left. And these are not trivial disagreements. These are not technical issues. These are basic questions of fundamental values. Let's move on to show some visualizations of this issue. On the right, you have a picture of congressional voting patterns. Each dot represents a legislator in Congress. The location of the dot is determined by how often two colleagues voted the same way on a bill. So if you voted the same way as another person, you were located near them in this infographic. And the dots are colored by the political party. Now, in 1951, you see that there's basically one blob of legislators. There's a left side to it and a right side to it, but there's a ton of overlap. Fast forward to 2011, and you see two completely distinct blobs. There's very little overlap. They're just different groups of people. So this is an illustration of how E Pluribus Unum is not happening. In fact, the opposite is happening. Here's another illustration. This is showing how different states voted in presidential elections. The size of the circle is the number of votes the state has, and it's positioned according to how Republican versus Democratic it voted. In 1988, you can see it was a good year for Republicans. And for that reason, the dividing line between blue and red is towards the left. But you can also see that if the race was more competitive, then there would have been a lot of states that were essentially swing states: Michigan, Colorado, Ohio, California, Texas, even places like Connecticut and Louisiana. Look at how CT and Louisiana are close together on that graph. The past is a different world. Fast forward to 2020, there's very few swing states. New York and California are out to one side. Tennessee, places like Tennessee and Wyoming and West Virginia on the other side. Just a couple of swing states: Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, places like that. Again, this manifestation of people are not converging together, but actually splitting apart. And I believe that there's a similarity between this process and the cellular biological process of meiosis, how a cell naturally splits apart. Now, I want to meditate a little bit on the damage, the social damage that this political polarization has caused. Here's a social media interaction between Gavin Newsom and Elon Musk. They don't like each other very much. They're basically insulting each other. They don't respect each other. And this is a very typical interaction. People on Twitter complaining and insulting each other all the time. Now, Gavin Newsom is obviously a left-wing progressive Democrat. Elon is supposedly a centrist. Now he's becoming a Trump supporter. So you could imagine that the problem is they have different political values. But what's very interesting is that both of them are completely capable of being respectful and friendly to Xi Jinping, the premier of China, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, who has values that are completely alien and completely hostile to all American values. So the problem is not that they have different political values, it's that they have different political values and they're trapped into the same country. That's what's creating the animosity. And I'm going to wrap this up on a personal note. This is a Facebook post a former friend of mine made. Stopped talking to him after he posted this. He basically says he doesn't want to be friends with Trump supporters. Okay, fine. What's interesting is that this guy is very well traveled, and he has friends from countries like Russia and China and Iran, countries that are 1,000 times more racist and authoritarian than any Republican. So what my friend is really saying is not that he can't be friends with people with different political values. Different hostile political values are okay, as long as they're in a separate country. If you're also an American, also in the same country as him, and you have different political values, sorry, we can't be friends. What's the solution? We have to admit that E Pluribus Unum doesn't work. America is not one nation. It's at least two nations that are forced to live together. That's not a good idea. It's creating animosity. It's creating bitterness. We need to separate ourselves politically. After a national divorce, we can go back to being respectful neighbors instead of dire opponents.